All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our VAS webinar. We're about to get started. And just as a reminder, this webinar is eligible for 1 credit of self-reported crop management for CCA CEUs. Just a reminder that many of you have known us as AgSource Laboratories, and we continue to join with our sister company and now operate under the name VAS. Over time, you will see the VAS logo more and more from us as items get updated. Together with their agricultural software expertise like DairyComp, FeedWatch, and the Pulse platform, and our extensive amounts of laboratory data, we have so much to provide our valued clients today and into the future. I'm Chris Clark, a certified crop advisor for VAS Laboratories, coming to you today from Wisconsin. I represent our network of testing laboratories in Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, as well as the VAS consulting team who provides manure and nutrient management plans, soil sampling, precision ag, and scouting for farms. VAS continues to advance forward with defining the whys behind our laboratory data and the hows when it comes to providing growers and the knowledge, the information and insights you need to take your crops and your ag business or farm to the next level. Joining me in this presentation of this webinar is my coworker, Eric Joost, a Wisconsin CCA for the VAS consulting team. He's serving as a nutrient management planner and a GPS technician in Wisconsin and Illinois. He will share his tissue sampling expertise as he collects many tissue samples and grid samples each year. First off, thank you again for joining us. We know that your time is valuable and we appreciate you signing up to watch this webinar. I can't wait for you to use the plant tissue information that we have gathered from our clients and staff. Healthy leaves equals yield. Plant tissue testing is a reliable tool to look at nutrient levels, either high or low, which is used to make decisions, resulting in a healthier and profitable crop. But producing yield is really complex. Take a look at this diagram showing some of the many factors that you may be able to control, like fertility, seed placement, seed genetics, and some that you can't control, like weather extremes. Sorry for causing any flashbacks with this next slide. Though this isn't the entire periodic table, instead it's the table of all the key elements for plants necessary for growth and reproduction. If you look at the upper left corner in the dark green, those are the macro elements, those needed in the largest amounts, N, P, and K. Next, in the light green color, are the secondary elements, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. And finally, the micronutrients, or those elements needed in the smallest amounts. You may be thinking, I do soil sampling, Chris, that's enough, right? Actually, soil sampling and plant tissue are best combined together. So soil sampling is not enough. Oh no. But the good news is that plant tissue testing is an affordable and complete assessment of all of those nutrients I just showed you. First, your soil results will tell you the amount of nutrients available to the plant. Then, using your plant tissue report, it's going to tell you the actual uptake or what the plant could obtain from the soil. So just like your annual blood test at a doctor, your young crops deserve a tissue test each year so they can perform at their potential. Providing your growing crops the right amount of these key nutrients has a 60% effect on yield. Tissue testing is important for all types of crops like corn, soybean, wheat, and veggie crops. And even more importantly for perennial crops like alfalfa, our tree crops like fruits, and as well as perennial berry crops. Because nutrients can be easily depleted by high yield and leached by drenching rainfall without you knowing it. Once a plant is visually showing you a nutrient deficiency, yield has already been lost. Thus, the potential for nutrient deficiencies and imbalances are going undetected unless you are able to use a tissue test. The best news is that plant tissue testing works on all crops, from apples to zucchini. So this is the year to start plant tissue testing. Here are the VAS plant tissue reports. But customers really do love the layout and how easy they are to read, not to mention our fast turnaround of results within 48 hours. The top portion of the report has the sample information and laboratory information. The middle represents your actual lab analysis for each nutrient, as well as the normal ranges. The bottom of the report graphs each nutrient and then ranks it as low, optimal, or high, seen in the highlighted area on the bottom of the slide. If your tissue results are very low, this means that more nutrient is needed. Addressing any nutrients falling into this category of very low is where your top return on investment will come. And the only way to discover the levels of any low nutrients is through plant tissue testing regularly. Let me repeat that again. The only way to discover if the levels are low of any of the nutrients is through using plant tissue testing regularly. If your lab result was optimal, you should continue the course. Your planned fertilizer program is working and your crop needs are being met. With a plant tissue test showing that it is high, no additional fertilizer is needed, and you could consider lowering it in the future to save money. When I walk through tissue reports with clients, I have them first look at those macronutrients, N, P, and K. Are any of those too high or too low? Then you focus on the secondary nutrients, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. And then finally, you look at the micros. It's in that priority that you will have the most success with tissue testing. Second, we discuss, can we correct it now, or is it something that we have to address for next season? Make sure that you have enough information. I usually do not like working with people if they only have one tissue test and not a current soil test to look at. Next, I'm going to take you on a journey of how VAS Laboratories clients are using plant tissue testing to have better quality and better quantity crops. Be sure to listen to each one. I'm confident that you will find a tissue program from this webinar that will fit your farm and your staff. Number one, it's very common to have people submit an abnormal tissue sample versus a normal tissue sample. This is when you're visually seeing differences in the field. They collect a sample from the healthy area and then a second sample from the abnormal looking area. By doing this type of sampling, this is what farms gained. They have the ability to specifically diagnose or predict toxicity and deficiencies. When combined with the recent soil test, they're able to rule out if it was a specific nutrient problem or imbalance. For a regulated dairy farm, the client was able to use this documentation for a rescue application of nitrogen to his cornfield. Look at this soybean field. They pulled a normal and abnormal sample at R3. The results showed that the sample was deficient in potassium. Soybeans do use a lot of potassium, especially early in the reproductive stages. Sulfur was nearly the same in both samples, but they were nearing the deficient line for both the normal and the abnormal. Based on these results and the time of the year, which was early August last year, no immediate action was taken. What, if anything, could have been done differently? They still took a tissue sample a little bit later in that growing season to track the potassium and sulfur levels. And next year, they're going to take an earlier plant tissue sample, no matter what the crop is, because they need to really check on those sulfur and potassium levels in that field. When you see obvious signs in the crop, you know that yield has already been lost. So further action is necessary. Which leads us to the second plant tissue program, the early season plant tissue testing program. This program captures some of the best return on investment. Why? Because detecting hidden hunger or identifying nutrients early, you have a 2 to 4 week window to be able to correct that deficiency before it affects yield. You're no longer guessing, and instead you're using precise tissue lab data to make multiple split applications. For example, a split application of adding any of the plant nutrients that we're testing very low on the plant tissue report to a side dress application. You can then have a secondary follow-up with a second weed pass application. And you're actually tracking what nutrients are trending low throughout the time, and think about adding that to next year's starter fertilizer. Always use a check strip in your field to be able to determine your crop's response as well. Number 3, what about joining other farms who tissue test during key crop growth stages? This is actually the most common program used by cooperatives and fertilizer dealers when they have summer interns. What can they gain? This type of tissue program predicts the need for various essential nutrients at critical growth stages. At a rough cost between $1 to $2 per acre, the tissue test can help you increase yield while reducing unnecessary input costs. Again, refer to the VAS tissue sampling guide and pay attention to Eric later about collecting a good sample and when the critical growth stages are for the key crops that you grow. Doing this type of program over several years, you will be able to develop trends per field by nutrient. I have had some of my clients tissue test and they said to me, all of my nutrients are showing up optimal or just into the high range. I say, bravo. That means that you're doing a superb job with your fertility program, but they continue to do tissue testing just for this reason, to be able to check and detect problems before they affect their yield. The plant growth stages is really the science behind plant tissue testing. If you look at the diagram on this slide, to the left of the yellow box is where a crop would be deficient in a nutrient. It's lacking the proper level of a particular nutrient. If you look at the top of the line, this is called luxury consumption. If you're applying more of a nutrient, the crop will uptake it just because it's there. May or may not actually increase any of the yield. To the far right, this is where a crop is entering the toxic zone. Take note that the amount between optimal and toxic is actually very small for micronutrients, and it's very easy to overapply, so make sure that you follow your product's labeled rates. Another way to show the uptake of the nutrients is to look over an entire growing season. Here we have corn, and there are 3 different lines on there. One is for nitrogen, one is for phosphorus, and one is for potassium. Each line shows the amount that the crop is uptaking as it progresses through from seedling into the reproductive stages to maturity. N, P, and K all follow a typical S-shaped uptake as the crop grows. This is what the sample timing is trying to capture by doing a growth stage sampling. Another way, my coworker, Dr. Jim Friedrichs, reviewed corn tissue tests over a growing season for 7 different fields. On the chart, the growing degrees go across the bottom. And at this time, we only graphed nitrogen. The top green line is the nitrogen high level. The red line is the nitrogen low level, and the low of the optimal high. 67% of nitrogen uptake occurs by tasseling, and this also shows the similar S-shaped uptake as the previous slide. Nutrient status is not the same. Even when the correct plant part is sampled, the growing degree days normalizes those values. So this reminds us again that plant tissue testing is only one diagnostic tool that is best compared with other resources as well. Another common tissue testing program is number 4, the end of season plant tissue testing program. This one will serve as a report card for you of your current fertilizer program. It is also an easy one to implement on the farm because you will collect your samples well before harvest and all of your spraying applications should already be done. Adding fertilizer is no guarantee that your plants will benefit from it. So you can use this plant analysis to determine whether the fertilizer program is performing according to your expectations and that the crop has the desired fertilizer all the way through to the end of the year. For example, a crop consultant that was using this program was able to determine that corn fields were running out of nitrogen, sulfur, and potassium late in the season, regardless of what the soil test levels were. In the case of nitrogen, they didn't necessarily need to apply more of it. They needed to use data to know when to apply it to maximize increased yield. The timing of plant tissue tests will alert you to problems that should be further evaluated and fixed for the next growing season. So it's very common if you do the late season plant tissue test that they will follow up with an early tissue sample the next year in that field just to catch any problems. Number 5 program is tissue testing your high yielding areas. So we have people that they will pick out, using some of their aerial imagery, the top areas of their field, because you should be just as cautious if plant nutrient levels are too high than if they are too low. The highest yielding areas of the fields often uptake the most nutrients, so it really helps you dial in your fertility needs. Your scouts, your agronomist, and your harvesting crew can be really helpful in determining where to sample. GPS marking the location can help you with sampling ease year after year. Number 6, what about tissue testing program using precision ag technology? Why? Because nutrient deficiencies are rarely affecting the entire field. The best way to go about determining where the problems are is to use the technology that you already have available to you. Do you already have aerial imagery? Do you have a UAV that has taken pictures of fields? And then also think back to your GPS soil sampling history, yield maps, or irrigation maps. One example is the image on the slide. They looked at this image and were quite confused about what the different colors meant. So they took a tissue sample and they found that there was a deficiency between the windrows, where there ended up being field compaction from traffic in the fields when it was wet. The roots couldn't access all the nutrients, and they were able to take actions to correct that afterward. Number 7, what about another tissue testing program with excellent return on investment? This would be a weekly or bi-weekly tissue testing program. A 2,000-acre dairy farm was able to gather data on their corn silage fields all season long. The farm learned that nitrogen was in excess on the corn silage fields, but boron and zinc were testing low 6 of the 12 times that they tested. Together with their agronomist, they lowered their nitrogen rate, and then they shifted some of the money that they saved on nitrogen to add boron and zinc to their starter fertilizer the next year. And they were sure to include a test strip of the foliar fertilizer to make sure. The farm will continue with the weekly tissue testing program, and they plan to expand it to alfalfa fields this year. Who knew there were so many different ways to plant tissue test? Number 8 is using plant tissue testing to complement your micros program. Plant tissue and soil tests, like I said, work best together. And the deficiencies of most micronutrients are actually identified more accurately by plant tissue than by soil. For example, sulfur. The soil test for sulfur measures only sulfate sulfur present. The plant analysis will give you the exact level of sulfur inside the plant. Remember, you must take care of your macronutrients, N, P, and K, before worrying about any of those micronutrients. So, number 9, plant tissue testing for fertigation applications. This is for growers that have irrigated crops. They're going to collect tissue samples about every 7 to 10 days. Well, very similar to the weekly and bi-weekly program, they are able to tie in even more data with their plant tissue. They include soil, satellite imagery, field history, and they have software that they can develop more precise fertigation applications. Fertigation is the application of liquid fertilizers through their irrigation system in an efficient way to supply nutrients through the entire growing season. There are liquid sources of phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, and micronutrients that are available for most crops. Adjustments are made each week after they get their tissue results while following the product labels. Number 10, you can use your plant tissue tests to estimate feed value. Did you know that an alfalfa at pre-bud has a higher nutrient level and lower tonnage than at full bloom? You can get a quick estimate of your crude protein by using your plant tissue results. You take your nitrogen percent times 6.25, and it equals an estimated crude protein. In forage, excess potassium should be evaluated if the crop is to be used as cattle forage because of issues with grass tetany and milk fever. While this shouldn't be a replacement for your forage tests, it is nice to use the tissue test for a little bit more when you have recent results. Alfalfa is often mining your soils, but how much? With each cutting of alfalfa, nutrients are removed from the field. Another crop that mines the soil very quickly is corn silage. At the very least, this amount represents the nutrients that needs to be replaced after a good harvest. What will the K levels be in an alfalfa tissue sample on your farm? Low or optimal? Sending in a tissue test is the way to learn more. On the flip side, have you ever wondered how much your cover crops have captured in nutrients, or how much nitrogen was prevented from leaching because you planted a cover crop? VAS has a cover crop biomass analysis, which looks at the nutrients, especially N, P, and K, that the cover crop was able to sequester from the soil as it grew. And then it gives an estimate of how much will be available when it decomposes to that next year's cash crop. Ask me for more information if this is eye-opening to you. I hope that you've enjoyed some of the best practices that other growers just like you have used plant tissue testing for. The good news is that it's affordable, quick, and easy to collect the samples yourself. I will have my coworker, Eric Joost, now take over to explain how he takes plant tissue samples from some of the most common crops we analyze at the lab. Go ahead, Eric.
Hello, everyone. Chris is right. It's simple to collect your own tissue samples and submit them to the VAS laboratory for analysis. Remember, how useful the lab results will be is heavily influenced by how and when the samples are collected and handled. We have a plant tissue sampling guide PDF for you to look up the different procedures for any crop that you will grow. The nutrient content can provide some clues to you if you are seeing a visual in nutrient symptoms. If you have a look at the chart in the circular diagram on the screen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, sodium deficiencies show the first symptoms in the older leaves on the plant, which are at the bottom. While magnesium, calcium, boron, molybdenum, iron, nickel, sulfur, zinc, and copper show up in the new younger growth. Not every time a plant changes its color, it's a nutrient problem, but a well-timed tissue test will help identify a nutrient problem before visual symptoms show up and affect your crop yield. When you go out into your fields to collect your tissue sample, here are some of the questions to think about for a few things you may see while looking closer up at the crop. Are visual leaf symptoms on the bottom, middle, or top of the leaves of the plants? Are the symptoms on the exteriors or the interiors of the leaves? Are they on the margins? Are they on the venations? Are there any patterns on the leaves? Is it individual plants or is the entire field? Are these plants clustered together, scattered across the field? Are they on the edges? Are any of the plants associated with topographic features such as like low spots or hilltops along tree lines? And then it's also important to look at what time of year it is or growth stage the plants are at. And never forget the weather, because any weird weather can always affect your crops. Here's a poll question for you guys. What's wrong with this corn? It's a photo of a purpling corn seedling. So let's go review some of the common corn visual symptoms. Nitrogen. Yellowing occurs from the tip down through the middle of the leaf and on the older leaves first. And then phosphorus, what we just saw, general purpling of the leaves on the older leaves first. And potassium, yellowing from the leaf edges on the older leaves first. Potassium and nitrogen can be similar, but as you can see, potassium is around the edges and nitrogen is through the middle. When I'm out tissue sampling, I make sure I have a supply of the paper plant tissue bags from our VAS laboratory and the sample forms to go with it. It's pretty easy for our clients to request complimentary testing supplies, and the lab will mail them to you. Be sure to ask for free shipping labels as well. And yes, free. I choose to tissue sample Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesdays if I have to mail the samples to the lab. This way the samples don't get stuck at the post office over a weekend, and getting the samples to our lab quicker ensures the more accurate results. I keep my coworkers at the lab happy by collecting and sending more plant material rather than not enough. So when you think you have enough, add more. If I get a crop that I haven't done in a while, like apples on a farm, I just refer back to the sampling guide and the charts, and it gets me ready to go out into the field and so I know what to take. It's important for the earlier stages, especially to Brush off the soil particles on the plants. I don't send in damaged leaves. I stay away from areas that are stressed. Any ponding or waterlogged specific sites, you don't want to skew your samples by getting plants that don't generally represent your field. And also insect infested groups you want to look out for. I generally don't sample field edges or next to a gravel road. The dust can have contaminants in there. If this is one of the areas that you do want to sample though, it's important to wash your plants off with clean water. And then for all your samples, loosely pack them in a paper bag. You want to allow some air circulation. You don't need to cram them in there too tight so nothing can breathe. And like Chris stated earlier, I'll commonly take 2 samples if I see normal plants versus abnormal plants, if there's high yielding or low yielding areas. It's important to look out for, and you can always take more samples, the better. You don't want to have samples that look different and skew your overall judgment of what the field is. As well, if you haven't had a soil sample in the field at the time in a recent while, more data can't hurt. So if you're in the field, it doesn't hurt to take a soil sample or 2. Every sample needs a sample form. What you fill out in the bag is not the form. The lab needs the actual sample form sheet for data entry. I label every bag and make sure that they match the samples on the submission form. On the bag, all you need is the field name and the number. And then on the sample submission form is where you put in your variety, include all the details of growth stage, information like that. Corn is the main crop by tissue sample. You need to pay attention to growth stages for what part of the plant to collect the tissue sample at. It changes with different growth stages. So from emergence to 1 foot tall, about V6, you collect the whole plant, not the roots. You snip the plant right above the base of the soil. This is when you want to make sure you don't have soil particles on the plant. And then prior to tasseling, you cut the first fully developed leaf from the top of the plant, as you can see at number 2 in the diagram. That's where you take it. And the third stage would be tasseling to silk. You take the leaf below and opposite of the ear is what is needed. Tissue tests during the first 2 stages I just mentioned is essential. Testing at that time will influence in-season application decisions. After tassel, tissue samples are used to assess nutrient levels as plants prepare for grain fill and fertility. This test at the end is a test to help better manage for next season's crops. You're taking a look to see if what you did this year was everything what the plant needed. Sampling 3 times a year especially gives you reference points and allows you to observe nutrient trends in the field, and you get a look at the overall growing season of how the plant did. Again, just to help better manage for years to come. Soybean samples should be taken at V4, R1, and between R2 and R3. At the seedling stages, you collect the whole plant just like the corn. Cut it off at the ground level. Don't include the root structure, and make sure you don't have any soil particles on it. And then at the reproductive stages, you collect the youngest mature trifoliate from the top of the 20 to 25 plants prior to flowering, as shown in this picture. And if you want to get more than 20 to 25, more material can't hurt. Use an early season soybean tissue test. This allows you for time to have applications of sulfur or other low nutrients if your crop needs them. For alfalfa and other forage crops, which also includes like wheat and oats, I collect the top 6 inches of the plants as I walk around in a zigzag pattern across the entire field. That's very important to get a general representative. As you can see in that picture, that's just how I would do it. This makes one sample the whole field look the same. If the field is not consistent, it would be a good idea to collect more than 1 sample. For instance, like north or south end, or east, west, left, right, down and low. You want to have a sample that is a good representative of the area you're pulling them in. The top nutrients to look out for in alfalfa are potassium, phosphorus, sulfur, and boron. It's important to look out for these. For example, if you have an alfalfa leaf spot is decreased with adequate potassium levels. Zinc deficiencies make alfalfa more susceptible to fungal diseases such as rhizoctonia and phytophthora. These 2 root rot diseases can cause major problems in alfalfa stands. And coming up next is a chart of common ag crops that you may tissue sample from our VAS sampling guide. You can see most require 30 to 50 plants or leaves. More material, the better. I can't emphasize that enough, guys. We don't want to have something sent to the lab and you get a call back saying you got to redo it. And also, here's some of the fruit crops. Fruit crops are listed here with the estimated time of year to collect in the Midwest. For instance, when I was sampling apples last year, I referred to this chart and apples for a refresher. As you can see, apples, stage of growth, current seasons, shoots, the fresh stuff. When to sample would be about July 1st to the 15th on a normal year, but we all know normal years don't always happen. The part of the plant is the first fully developed leaves at the midpoint of the new shoots and 40 leaves or more. More should be bolded. Quickly, your lab results will be mailed to you, emailed to you, or posted on your iLine account. Based on your sampling report, you will either have one sample on it or multiple samples in your summary, depending on how many you took. From the big data at the lab, here's some of the trends we've noticed you should watch out for in your samples when you check your crop this year. But did your corn have any mid-season applications of nitrogen that it benefited from? There can be lack of sulfur in wet years. The most common deficiencies that show from our lab are zinc followed by potassium, magnesium, and boron. In soybeans, the most common deficiencies we see are copper followed by potassium. And in wheat, the most lacking nutrient was chloride followed by copper, boron, zinc, and magnesium. Alfalfa, the top nutrients are phosphorus, sulfur, boron, or potassium, phosphorus, sulfur, and boron. When you're looking at your tissue results, here are some of the things to know. For example, I have highlighted in yellow, if your plant tissue results show magnesium is low, it could be from high levels of potassium and or calcium, taking up the magnesium of taking up the availability of magnesium. It's often not just one nutrient, but it's very possible it's a combination of them. How else would you know that without a tissue test? Many nutrient imbalances share similar symptoms in crops that may suffer from multiple deficiencies at the same time. Other plant problems can cause symptoms similar to nutrient imbalances. This is why tissue samples can help you rule out whether this is a nutrient imbalance or not. These problems can be temperature. Is the soil cool? Is it flooded? Is there frost on it? Some of the diseases produce similar symptoms to nutrient imbalances. Too much water or too little water can cause issues. Soil compaction, especially. Insect attacks also mimic nutrient imbalances symptoms as well. Pesticides can hurt plants if it's not done properly. Damage can also produce similar symptoms. Symptoms may just respond and look different on different species of plants. Nutrient imbalances may be silent before symptoms will become visible. Utilize tissue testing to look at inside your crop this year. The crop you need deserves it. The crop you grow deserves it. Leaf, root health, and nutrition play a major role in the life of crops. Nutrients found in the soil and plant must be monitored on a continual basis. If we have yet to convince you on why to try a plant tissue testing, here's Chris again to summarize some more of the information.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for sharing how easy it is for people to go out and collect their own tissue samples for a lot of those common crops that are seen at the laboratory. The plant tissue tests are cheap. They're approximately $20, and it takes you about 5 to 10 minutes to do your own sampling in a field. The results are interesting, and it really does help you to learn more about your fields. So tissue tests, you'll be able to help you improve some of your profits and yields. You can save money on your fertilizer, or at least shift some of the money from a lower nutrient and put it towards one that you discovered to be low. You can learn any yield limiting factors on your current crops, and the only way to find out of the program that you're doing is paying is by checking up on it with a plant tissue test. You can also see what the high yielding areas are achieving by uptaking, and then kind of compare that to a poor area. You can also find out what would fix the poor area in your field. Growers, just like you, have found multiple ways to use plant tissue on the farm. Which one are you going to be able to use this year? Is it going to be the normal versus abnormal tissue sample? Will it be the early season tissue test, a tissue test at those key growth stages, an end of the season tissue test? What about the high yield versus low yielding area? A tissue sample based on precision ag? Is it a weekly or a bi-weekly tissue testing program? Is it one to complement your micros program? If you have irrigation, can you use this to fertigate? And the last one, can you utilize it to determine your animal feed value and maybe what nutrients a cover crop has captured? So to help you get ready for your tissue sampling, just go ahead and request complimentary tissue bags and shipping labels online at VAS. If you enjoyed today's webinar, we'd also welcome you to check out any of our additional agronomy webinars at vas.com underneath the education tab. We have, is your soil in need of a health checkup? And then the 8 characteristics that can define field profitability now are available on demand. Thank you on behalf of VAS Laboratories and the VAS consulting staff. We cannot wait to analyze your samples, and feel free to contact Eric or myself anytime afterward. If we can't help you, we know that we have a VAS coworker who can. Once again, thank you for watching. We eagerly await to see you at the next webinar. And then thank you in advance for your responses to the survey that will pop up once you exit. We're excited to learn about what specific topics you may want to have a future webinar on. Reminder, you can self-report 1 continuing ed credit in crop management using the information on the slide now, as well as the date, the presenters' names, and title. And then watch your email for the follow-up resources on plant tissue that we discussed today.
Thank you, Chris and Eric. We did have a couple questions come in, so I'll go ahead and get those asked. The first question, could a dried biomass sample of cover crops be tested for nutrient uptake?
So in order to do the proper valuable results, we don't want a dried sample. There's actually a step that you have to do before you dry the biomass sample at the laboratory. Is you'll take either a 2-foot by 2-foot area or a 3-foot by 3-foot area, and you cut everything that is grown in that square area, and you actually have to weigh it yourself out in the at the field or in the farm, that everything that you clipped. So then from that big sample, you'll take some and you'll fill the tissue bag, and we at the laboratory will dry it. So I do not suggest that you send in a dried sample. You're not going to get all of the information that we can provide you if you dry it beforehand.
Thank you, Chris. Another question that just came in, showing deficiencies caused by excess levels with a question mark.
Yeah, deficiencies can be shown from excess levels of other nutrients. So it's called uptake anatagonism. So like high levels of certain nutrients can cause the plant to not be able to take up other nutrients from those exchange sites being already utilized.
Thank you, Eric. Another question, are tissue ranges based on historical data or more recent findings?
I can answer that one. At VAS Laboratories, because we process so many tissue samples between a wide area, we have like a kind of a hybrid version of that. We utilize university research that has been out there, and then we also kind of normalize it by all of the data that we have within our database. So I would say it's kind of a mix of the two.
Thank you, Chris. I believe that's all the questions that have come in so far. If anyone has any other questions, I lied. I found another one that came in. Is there any benefit to using grid sampling or tissue sampling?
I have seen people utilize the grid soil sampling to kind of like pick out areas that they're going to collect a sample. I have not seen anyone pull a sample per every grid spot like you would a soil sample. So it's kind of like refer you back to the precision ag one, is if you have that technology, it's definitely worth looking at to help you direct where you might collect the tissue sample.
Okay, I believe that is all the questions that have came in. If anyone has any other questions, obviously feel free to email either one of our presenters, Chris or Eric. Their emails are on the screen currently, as well as you are welcome to reply to the post-webinar email that you will be getting. Everyone have a wonderful day.